I think it's important to know that likes does not equal sale, hype does not equal sale, because that is not what your focus should be. Your focus should be on your product, the quality of your product, the way you market your product and your brand, and the way you offer it.
From Caribbean Ideas Synapse in Trinidad and Tobago, this is Uptick, a podcast that's part of the Snapshot Podcast Network. Uptick is a show that brings you the stories of the Caribbean entrepreneurs and innovators who are building the next generation of great companies. These are the stories you don't typically hear of how these leaders are working to build brands and businesses that have the potential to not only improve the Caribbean world, but also help the Caribbean world make an impact on the global business stage. Their stories will move you, inspire you, push you to take action, or maybe help spark your next great idea.
I'm your host, Chike Farrell, and in today's show, you learn how a desire to create a lifestyle fashion brand that's grounded in customer love while also balancing a commitment to ethics and impacting the community drives today's guest. You learn how this citizen of the world approaches reinvention, brand extension, and why she isn't afraid to follow her gut and commit, even when others say she should do otherwise. She's learned that being authentic and customer-focused in all that you do can lead to sustainable business success versus chasing popularity without substance.
I was actually born in Brazil, in Rio. My father is Trini, but my mother is Brazilian. And when I was 8, we moved as a family to Trinidad. And I lived in Trinidad from 8 to 18. And then I moved to Miami to go to university. And I stayed there for quite some time. And then I hopped over to LA for a little bit. And then about 2-3 years ago, I'm not really exactly sure if it was 2 or 3, maybe even more, but not too long ago, I moved back home. So I'm now back in Trinidad and Tobago.
Cool. And so when did you start your Chandra Maharaj Designs?
So I started right after I graduated from fashion design school. And I believe that was like in 2010, 2011. I was in Miami at the time. And so the root of my business actually was planted while I was in Miami, and it has since flourished internationally, which I'm very grateful for. But it has really been nurtured right here at home, which is nice.
Great. So you grew up in Brazil and all the way through till you were 8. What part of Brazil?
So I was born in Rio, but then we moved to Vitória, which is one state above Rio, which is where my mother's from, and my sister was born, and my dad worked for many years. But every time I go back, I always go back to Rio because that's where my heart is.
I love Brazil, love Rio. It's certainly one of my favorite places. So I'm certainly envious of you getting to grow up there and spend time there. So you speak Portuguese and the whole 9 yards?
Yes, I speak Portuguese, English, and I'm pretty good at Spanish as well.
Okay, great. Oh wow, I like that. Yeah, I have a bucket list of getting to speak a few languages, and that's certainly one of them. So okay, all right, good. So now I'm inspired once again to continue on that journey. So I want to dive in. So you had this experience of you kind of you sort of straddle different worlds, right? You grew up in Brazil, and then you also know Trinidad and Tobago, and then you spend time abroad. So how have those different experiences kind of like come together to shape your worldview, and how does that play into how you approach business?
Well, I always say that I'm a child of the world because I feel like I've been able to kind of pull the good parts of each one of those countries and cultures and people. And I've learned so many things, from all of and not even just these countries where I've lived, but also the countries that I've managed to travel to. I love traveling, and that's a really important part of life for me. It's a very valuable thing for me to do. And so I tend to observe and, take what I think is for me, and fulfills me as a human being, as a business person, as a woman, and things like that. So I'm very multifaceted, I think would be a good word to describe it.
Great. So you formally studied in the sort of like fashion and design world. So what was it that led you to go down the path? Because sometimes we talk with folks who made a big switch, but also sometimes we talk with folks who are doing the thing that they actually studied and they kind of sort of knew. So did you always know that that was the path that you wanted to go on?
So I actually have a degree in international business, and I did that degree first. And after I did that degree and I started doing my master's, is when I realized that I did not want to continue doing my. I was doing a master's in international business as well, and I didn't want to do that. And I always tell this story, and it's kind of like one of those very cliche stories, but I literally had one of those moments where I was like tapping my forehead against the door of my living room, thinking like, what am I doing? Like, this is not what I want to do. Like, what's the right thing to do? And like at the very moment, this commercial for the Art Institute, which at that time, which it probably still is, a part of Miami International University, the commercial popped up, and it just like that switch went off, and you kind of think that people tell these stories and it's not a real thing, but it was like a real actual experience for me. And I just knew at that very moment that I needed to switch my major. So I dropped out of my master's program and I moved to my fashion design degree.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So then, as you started to make that switch, then so it actually was a little bit more of a almost like a an aha moment for you as you
Yeah,
went, right?
but it was kind of a supplemental type thing because I think I've always known that I was a business person as well as a creative, left brain and right brain. And as difficult as it is to switch sometimes, I knew the importance of knowing how to do business before I created a product to do business with.
Right.
So I have absolutely no regret. I just think that both of those things, both of those degrees were very, very important for me to be able to do what I'm doing right now.
Got you. So then, so you go, you do the degree, and you learn, and you're in a place that that there's a fair amount of fashion and entertainment and lifestyle brand and so on. So what did you pick up from from sort of that second set of formal training that sort of translated into you moving further in this space?
Well, that's where I learned that it's not all glamorous. That's when you're able to actually learn to do the work. And there's different types of fashion designers, and it's important to explain the difference because there's the fashion designer that just has an idea, goes to a seamstress, gets it done, sells it. That fashion designer doesn't have the understanding, the technical understanding of things. That fashion designer doesn't know how to draw croquis and consider the construction aspect of things, and so it's very different. And it's okay, there's different types and they're all fine, but in my particular case, going to fashion design school and learning all of those very important details and aspects of the fashion design industry, it really changed my perspective and my ability to design, but not only design, to market and to sell. So those are all really, really important parts of being a designer.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting because, now as I understand you started off in one place, but has certainly been able to kind of expand into other areas. So you talk a little bit about, when you started your company, what was I guess the opportunity that you were trying to tackle, right? Because there are lots of design houses, and there's lots of fashion and lots of creators out there. So when you're thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to start this thing, what was that starting process like for you mentally? What were you trying to fill into?
So, great question. I knew that I was going to be creating a path that had never been created before. I knew that there were things that I was willing to do and there were things that I was not willing to do. And I knew that none of it was going to be easy. And I also was very aware that there was nobody that had done this before me. So there was nobody that I could look up to say, oh, let me use this person as a mentor because this person did exactly what I want to do. So in my particular case, I never wanted an actual store. I wanted the liberty to be able to run my store from whatever country I'm in at that point in time. And I wanted, of course, I didn't want the overheads, but basically I wanted the freedom to be able to sell from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world. So that was one of my foundation pieces. And I'm not so sure that that has been done before. It may or may not, but not the way that I am doing it or I've done it, you know. And then on top of that, there's different elements to my business. Like, for example, my production for my personal brand is done in Brazil. Then, you know, when I was in Miami, it would be shipped to Miami and I will ship out of Miami. Now that I'm in Trinidad, it's shipped to Trinidad and I ship out of Trinidad internationally. So that's also something that's different, you know. Eventually I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm going to need to have a warehouse that you know, the staff in that warehouse does my shipment for me. But for right now, for as long as I can do my shipment, for as long as I can interact with my customers firsthand, for as long as I can write that thank you note with love, you know, and attach it to my orders, as long as I can put that very personalized care into my work, I'm going to do it.
Having this conversation, during COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. So a lot of organizations and companies are having to refactor their operations for a remote world and a distributed world and a digital world, and you created that by design. So actually, that's very, very convenient as it happens. But what was it about being able to? You said, I wanted to be able to work from anywhere in the world, and I also wanted to be able to sell to anywhere in the world. So sort of had that almost explorer's mindset from the jump. Why is that, do you think? Why was that important to you?
Because I feel like I don't ever want to become complacent. I don't ever want to become bored in my process. I don't ever want to feel limited in my process. I don't ever want to lack experience in my process. And for me, the way that I keep that from happening is by traveling. You know, so my parents live in Brazil, so it's very important that I go to Brazil for a certain amount of time in the year. A lot of my very close friends and family are in the US because I spend so much time there. So it's very important that I also go there every year, you know, nurture those relationships and those friendships. And the same goes for being in Trinidad. So as of right now, it's extremely important for me to be in 3 different countries at some point of the year. And, there's little challenges here and there in making that happen and making it work well. But, I'm figuring it all out as I go along. And that's the way I've done it for as long as I've been doing it. And I've been blessed to say that I have found solutions to every problem.
Great. So you started off in the swimsuit space.
Yes.
And then now you have sort of expanded to other areas. So maybe walk me and the listeners through, where you started and what you do now.
Okay, so I started with swimwear because, well, one, it's a very logical place to start as a fashion designer. It's a smaller product. With my customer base, it was an easy sell because, of course, I was based in Miami, Trinidad and Tobago, and my products were coming from Brazil. And if there's one thing that's constant in all of these places, is that it's the tropical climate and the beaches, right? And also growing up, I was known for like wearing these teeny tiny little bikinis, which in Trinidad at that time was unusual. And of course, being in Miami, it's everywhere, So for me, it was the logical first step. Although the funny thing about that is that when I did my degree, the one thing that they didn't offer was how to do swimwear. So
Wow, okay.
I learned how to do ready to wear, couture, a billion other things, everything but swimwear. And so I had to then now take everything that I learned for these different types of fashions and then adapt it into the swimwear industry. And coincidentally, which I don't believe in coincidences, but I'm just using that word for now. My family and I had gone on a family vacation to Brazil right after I graduated from fashion design school, and some of my aunts were seamstresses, and again that light bulb went off. I was like, oh well, maybe I can make this a family business. I can ask my aunts to sew swimwear for me, and we can start there. But they also didn't know how to sew swimwear. They were more experienced in sewing clothing. So that was the start of my learning experiences and the start of my business, and the start of me learning how to make patterns for swimwear and how to then edit those and create a size that worked for me and my customer base, and to create a fit that worked for me and my customer base. And then once I was settled with swimwear and I was comfortable with that, I continued growing. I then stepped into fitness wear. Again, that's something that was a very big part of my life. I'm very much into fitness, and so why not grow into that aspect of things? And so I started with fitness wear, and that did well. And then from there, I went into ready to wear. That went well. And then I went into fet wear. That went well. And then I continued growing my brand into lifestyle brand. So then I rebranded from Chandra Maharaj Swimwear into Chandra Maharaj Designs, which then allowed me to continue growing. And then eventually I started designing costumes for Carnival. And my latest venture is male wear. So I have so many little bits of what I would call limbs to my brand. So
Right.
it's a lifestyle brand, and I've grown quite a bit. And I think with time I'll continue growing, but for now I'm gonna continue nourishing these parts of it until I'm comfortable enough to keep growing past that.
So it's interesting because, as you've kind of shared that journey of, okay, I was doing this thing, and then there was this, seemingly logical next step, and then there was another logical step.
Yeah.
But I'm curious because, I think one of the things that, can challenge people who are building organizations or building businesses or brands is, what is the next step and how do I make it? So for you, was that, were those what seemed like very logical steps? Were they driven by I was getting more demand, or was it that you were seeing an opportunity? Like, what was leading to each kind of sequential step?
Both. I definitely listen to my customers. That's a very, 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 very important part of my business. I listen to their feedback. I listen to what they want, and so that way I can give them what they want. Because another part of my business is that I design so many collections throughout the year. I don't do it the way that the traditional fashion designer, they have like a summer collection, a winter, spring, like things like that. I don't do it that way. What I do is I design maybe about 8 to 12 collections a year, and I drop that throughout the year. So they give me their feedback if they want something different, if they want, if I have a particular design and they want it to be a little bit more covered or a little less covered, things like that I take into consideration. But also, I think I've learned to see opportunity when it's there. And so, I take the risk and I kind of dive in. And if it works out, we continue. And if it doesn't, on to the next.
Okay. So you've done something that's interesting. You've put your name, forward as your brand, right? Yeah. I want you to talk with me a little bit about that, right? What are the things that means for you?
Yeah.
And how does that change maybe how you operate as a result?
Yeah. So I've had a lot of conversations about this with business advisors and friends, because, well, first and foremost, especially when I was in the US, my name is a very hard name for them to remember, to spell, and to know how to pronounce. So that in itself, in the business world, tends to be a no-no, because you want the name to be a name that you remember, and you want it to be, a name that they can spell and just go on Google and type it in, and so that's something I had to really think about, because I was very advised against it. And then, of course, that meant that I am now my brand. I am the face of my brand. I am my brand. And so, with that comes certain responsibilities, So, I can't ever hide behind a company name. I can't ever hide behind staff. At the end of the day, I am my brand. And so, that means I have to always be 100% authentic when it comes to anything that I put out, and just my business practices and things like that, which is okay because I'm a very honest person, and that's not something that bothers me. The reason why I decided to keep my name is because my father has two daughters. And that meant that if I didn't keep my name, that if I were to get married and decided to change my name, which now I can't, that means that his name would have been lost, and I think that that's a major part of why I chose to use my name as a part of my brand name. I also love my name, and that's not something that a lot of people can there's a lot of significance behind the name, the meaning. I'm sorry, there's a lot of significance behind the meaning of my name, and I hold that very dear to my heart. And so for me, it just made sense that I would do it regardless of the fact that I was highly advised against it. But this is one of those things where, like, as a business person, as an entrepreneur, you have to make the decision that's best for you and not always necessarily do what you're told. I was also advised against my logo, which I designed myself with very little illustrator knowledge, but I designed myself. And at that time, which, like, my business has been operational for almost 10 years. And at that time, they're like, well, it's like three symbols next to each other. So it's just not good for marketing and things like that. But it's my business, that's the logo that I want. It's also significant. It's not just not just three symbols next to each other. There's a meaning to everything that I do. There's a meaning to the moon, to the heart, and to the ocean. And so this is where you have to make the decisions that are best for you and that you believe in, and cross your fingers and hope that it works out for you in the future.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I think part of the journey of being an entrepreneur is you have to sort of parse out, when to take advice, when to follow advice, when to just, kind of go on your own. In fact, a lot of the time you're gonna get second guessed or doubted. Sometimes maybe it feels like, even in my experience, sometimes maybe all the time by your teams or by others. So I think it's really important to find out what are the things that, tell you. Is it that you sort of like you follow your heart on those decisions when you're like, okay, no, I'm going to go in my own direction, or is there a process you follow? How do you approach that?
It's all heart. It is all heart. I'm a very, very, very firm believer in my intuition. If I'm doubtful, then I consider other options. But if there is no doubt in how I feel, then there's nothing that anybody can tell me that will change my mind. And it's heart and just intuition and faith and belief. I think it also has to do with my vision and knowing my vision and knowing what it is that I want out of this brand.
Yeah, well, actually, I want to talk with you a little bit more about vision. Where are you trying to take your company and your business? If you think out, 3 years, 5 years further out, where is that? What does that look like for you?
I mean, I think that I wanted to continue to evolve as a lifestyle brand, but into products that continues to make people feel beautiful, loved, empowered, vibrant. And these are the things that I design my products with. I design all of my products with intention, and a lot of people don't know this, but I work on my patterns and I work on my designs. I'm very, 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 very hands-on. I take 2 to 3 months every year. I go to Brazil and I really work with my team there and sometimes by myself. And I put a lot of attention to detail with my pieces because I want the person that is wearing them to feel a certain type of way. I want them to feel amazing. I want them to feel beautiful. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel valuable. I want them to feel, you know, as if they're contributing something to society. So like a lot of the things that I do, like for example, right now I have a short collection, short as in shorts, like male shorts and female shorts, and part proceeds of those, part of the profits of those are meant to go back to the tribes from the Amazon Indians. And at the time that I
Right.
designed that collection is when everything was happening in Brazil, and I was actually there at the time. And I went and I visited a Tupi Guarani tribe, you know, in Brazil to speak with them personally to get their feedback to just kind of leave what the media was telling us, because in Brazil you were getting one set of information on the news, and I know that otherwise, like on Instagram and in the US news it was something else, and so information was very conflicting. And I had always wanted to go and visit them anyways because I'm a descendant. My mother is a descendant from one of those tribes, and that was the perfect opportunity to kind of get in a car and drive to them and sit down and really actually have a conversation with them one on one, to hear from them what it is that they need, and it's really very sad because, I mean, I'm not going to get into it because it becomes political, but it's really very sad because they have no assistance from the government there. So it really kind of it comes down to them to kind of do all of these little tourist things to be able to survive and take care of themselves and their families. And then for people like me, I thought, well, if there's anything that I can do for them, let me create this limited edition collection where the profits of that can then go back to them. So it's not going to come back to me, it's going to go back to them. So when I go back to Brazil, which I was planning on
At
doing
some
in
point.
August, I don't know if that's going to happen anymore, but at least the proceeds from that will go to them. And so you're not just buying it to look good for yourself, you're now buying it and it can also make you feel good about buying it. So I want to kind of like create that culture that goes beyond just looking good, but also feeling good about what you purchase.
When we come back, Chandra shares why cause-based business is so important for leaders and consumers today. She'll share tips on making your way in the carnival fashion industry and explore why likes and hype in her experience doesn't necessarily equal sales. What are some of the ways that outside of your designs and your creative that you work to help people feel loved and to feel a connection with the brand?
I realized that because I am the face of my brand, a lot of people rely on me to show a lot more of myself. And so that allows them to then connect to me, which then allows them to connect to my brand. And because of the information that I put out, the things that I share, like my memes, for example, let's use that as an example, like people kind of may not realize, but how effective those are for the people that support me. Sometimes I would post something very just organic, something that I would be feeling or something that a friend of mine is feeling, and I post it. And then the response in my DMs from that, oh my God, you don't know how much I feel heard or understood, or that message was for me, like little things like that. And so I'm able to connect with them past just the fashion that I'm offering. I'm also offering a way to connect, a way to feel heard and understood, being relatable, things like that. So I think that's one of the ways. I know that they would like me to show more of myself, more of my personal life, more of my private life, and that's something that I'm working on. I need to find a very clear boundary so that I don't feel as if my personal life isn't personal, but at the same time I know that they want to know what I do all day. Like, what are you doing? like, how are you coping? Like, I have a lot of people asking me how I'm coping through these times. Like, they want to know what I'm doing to cope and things like that. So, I mean, I'm working on sharing a little bit more, but I have to keep something sacred. So,
Of course. Well, it's interesting because I know that one of the things that you're doing in the midst of, the pandemic right now is you're doing some really interesting things with creating masks, right?
yeah.
Especially as people have to, now kind of get the orders and follow the orders to do that. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing there.
So, a few weeks ago, I had a friend of mine from New York call me. He's like, Chandra, you need to start doing masks because some of the New York designers had started doing masks, and but it was something that happened like that. Like, you know, Corona happened, and then all of a sudden, like people were going into overdrive creating these masks because there was a shortage, and it was just all so fast. And I remember very clearly telling him, like, if I'm going to create masks, I'm going to do masks that are more effective than just the traditional cloth masks. Because for me, anybody can make a cloth mask, but they're not effective. Or I'm not going to say they're not effective, because anything is better than nothing, but they're not as effective as people think they are. And that in itself creates a danger because they are now under the impression that just because they have this cloth mask on their face, that the risk is not there, and that's something that really didn't sit well with me because I wanted to, if like if I was going to create a mask, I wanted the product to be a really good product. And in my, taking my time to figure it out and doing my research, my sister actually kind of pulled out her machines and started, you know, creating test masks. And we went through a few. To be fair, she did a lot of that initial work of like just kind of testing shapes and things like that and putting the materials together. And then after about, I want to say like 7 8 test masks, we decided that we had a really good mask, which was a 3-layered mask, 100% cotton on the outside, a layer of pellon on the inside. If you do the blow the lighter test with this particular mask, you cannot blow the lighter, which means that there's already like that additional level of protection for the person that's wearing it. And I was more comfortable putting out that mask. Now, the issue with that mask is that it's extremely time consuming to make because whereas the other cloth masks will probably take 15-20 minutes to do, this one takes way longer than that because there's so many processes involved in making it happen. Making it structured, making it fit well, and then we sized it so there were kid sizes, adult sizes, and extra large sizes. And we started, we put it out there where for every mask sold, we will donate one. And so we've gotten a lot of great feedback. We've got a lot of orders. So right now we have over 500 masks cut, not all complete, but we have over 500 masks cut. So we're fulfilling some orders, and once we're done with all of those orders, we're going to go ahead and go into the production for the donation masks. And so once those are done, we're going to go and target, like the health centers and the places that really need it. There's some people that did come to us asking. So I'm also sending some to some doctors in Miami that are not getting any masks at all. So I'm shipping some to Miami to a friend there, and some to doctors in New York as well. So it's not just in Trinidad. There's a lot of Trinidadians in the US that are also in need of masks that are reaching out.
Of course.
I think they're feeling a little bit more comfortable with these masks because of the layers and because of the protection that the average cloth mask isn't giving them. But for me, this was my way of giving back and helping in the situation. Whenever there's something that's hurting the people, of my country and the world. In this case, I always think like, what can I do to help? Because for me, service is a very, very huge part of my business. It's important as a human, period, but it's also an underlying, it's again part of the foundation of my business. Like I have always done something every year, multiple times a year. Sometimes if it's a bigger project, once a year, but it's extremely important to keep that part of my business alive. And so whatever I can do to give back, I do.
That's powerful. I mean, I think that finding ways to weave in kind of like giving back just like a great way to build or run a business. And it's of course, as you kind of mentioned and experience, something that draws today's consumers. I mean, I think it's always drawn consumers to brands, but I think that now, our current market and our current consumers, our younger consumers, they want that and they're looking for that. I actually want to probably dive into that new age consumer, because there are lots of evolutions that have happened in the fashion space, in the carnival space, as a result of sort of new consumers, new demands, etc. Right? So, what are some of the trends that you have seen recently that you think are noteworthy, and also that you see kind of going forward, going out in the next couple of years among the kind of Caribbean fashion consumer?
Well, I think having an ethical fashion brand or carnival brand or anything like that in the industry is something that's important and that people are starting to become a little bit more aware of. And it's something that I've been kind of advocating, but I don't want to step on anybody's toes. And I know that everybody's process is very different, and everybody's what's the word? It takes time. It takes time for people to change their systems, the way that they've been doing things, and it takes time for them to figure out how to improve, but the truth is that the fashion industry, but the fast fashion industry, not the normal fashion industry, the fast fashion industry is horrible for the earth, and just to be clear, for those that don't know what fast fashion is basically the Forever 21s and the H&Ms and those types of brands that have a turnaround of like days, where an actual designer will put out something into the catwalk, and the next day they would have a bootleg version of it in their stores, and they're selling it for $5, $6, $7, $8, $10, some ridiculous low price. And what happens when you purchase from those brands? What happens is that they now have to force their manufacturers and production facilities in countries like India and China and wherever they produce, to produce faster at cheaper prices, and that is devastating for the people that are in those production houses, that are actually sewing. If you were to do research and see the conditions, it's horrible, horrible, horrible. And on top of that, these clothes are worn once or twice and then they're thrown away, and it just goes into like this ginormous landfill that clothes doesn't dissolve into the earth. And so what happens is that you're just kind of supporting a really, really negatively impacting habit. So when you support small businesses, local businesses, and businesses that don't do all of that, then it's really kind of, it supports the good aspects of the fashion industry. So for example, I hire my team in Brazil is like a mother of two, and she would bring her children to work and things like that. And then we would sit there and we would think about how we can have no waste, like when we're cutting, so there's no waste fabrics. And we're able to kind of like really sit down and think and brainstorm of ways of making our brand, like my brand, our brand, because we're all a part of it, really, as efficient and as earth friendly as possible. And I think once other designers and other parts of the industry start to kind of like just making these small changes, it doesn't have to be a complete turnaround, little by little by little. You know what I mean? Like for example, this year for Carnival, I had a collection made of just leftover fabrics. So all of these little pieces of like little triangles that are left over when you cut a bathing suit and when you cut a pair of leggings and things like that, and they could make a little triangle bra top. All of those little pieces, we joined it up with other little pieces of fabric and created a whole collection of just pieces of leftover fabrics.
Wow, that's wild. That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was another way of me kind of encouraging my supporters to partake in something that was helpful towards the earth. So I mean, there's so many little ways of doing it, and these are just a few, but I can go on forever and ever.
Yeah, no, well, that's great. So that's interesting. So there's a trend around kind of like the demand for ethical fashion. I mean, one of the other things that's interesting for me, I mean, I kind of like you, split time and, lived in the US or Canada and then Trinidad for a few years and back in the US now. And, so sort of seen, for example, the Monday wear evolution over the past few years and some of the ways that Carnival kind of continues to evolve in fascinating ways. What do you see kind of continuing to happen there over the coming years in the carnival design space?
Um, well, I think that this current situation right now is opening a lot of eyes to some of the processes involved in the carnival industry that could potentially have, take a little bit of editing, a little bit of innovation, a few changes here and there. Um, I think that I don't know. It's really hard to predict, but if I were to suggest something, I would say that they will find ways of becoming more ethical as well, because it would be beneficial for everybody in the long run. Right now, as it is, Tribe, for example, decided to start recycling the feathers. So after Carnival, you can now go back to Tribe. You can drop off your big backpacks, and what they will do is that they will use those feathers, recycle those feathers in carnivals to come. Or they will sell it to other carnival bands that are in need of those feathers, or they will donate it, I don't know, to um, if I'm not mistaken, to maybe like children's projects at schools where they want
Sure.
to do like projects, things like that. So they're not just throwing away the feathers, and so that in itself is a huge, huge, huge step forward. Something I'm really actually very, very proud about in terms of being, a part of the Bliss, which is also part of the Tribe family. So I think that that's a beautiful thing that they're doing. It really made me very, very happy when I saw that. And there's also on the streets they're doing these recyclable cups, so you feel you're
Yeah.
I don't want to give you the wrong information, but at the end of the day they're taking the steps to be as ethical as possible in an industry that in the past has had a lot of criticism in terms
Mhm.
of those things.
Got it. And I'm curious as well, if there's someone who's kind of, looking at someone like you and they say, wow, how do I kind of break into this industry? It's an industry that, especially if you're not in it, like me, it's actually fascinating to listen to it because I have a, sort of a consumer's view of it from the outside. So the things that you hear, oh, well, I don't know, it's competitive and it's cutthroat and it's this and it's that and it's hard to break in. How do you see the opportunity for someone who has a similar ambition to kind of break in? What are the kinds of things that people can do that give themselves a shot at, getting seen and, becoming a designer for a band? Is it because some people might say, oh, is it you have to just know the right people and I don't know the right people, so I can't get in there? What are some of the ways that someone can kind of
For a
make their way?
band or in general?
Well, I would say for a band, let's kind of stay in the carnival. If you're interested in designing in the carnival space, how do people find a way to break in there?
um yeah, it's a little tricky. You see, the thing is that they always provide anyone the opportunity to design and show a costume. Um, but there's so many um, uh, there's so many rules and regulations. Like there's so many processes that you have to go through to get the costume to the point where it's ready. Even for me,
Sure.
and I've been very transparent about this in the past, and I have a great mentor, who's Monique. But designing costumes for me have been extremely tricky because it's a completely different process from designing for my own brand. I am now designing for this powerhouse, and they have these set rules and regulations from decades before me, and they're very specific about their product and how it looks. And so, you have to be very willing to work with them to make sure that what you design is approved by them, and for a designer who never designed for anyone else but myself, that was a new experience for me. But I actually really enjoy it because I'm learning so much. Every year I learn so much more, but even for me, it hasn't been an easy process. It's been a lot of sweat and tears and a little bit of blood here and there, and um, and it's very long process. But at the end of the day, I'm always in love with the costume that ends up being the final product. So I know a lot of people want to be a part of it, but a lot of people don't really know what it takes to be a part of it. A lot of people are like, oh, well, I have an idea for costume. Like, I've been playing Carnival for however long. I want to make this costume and try to have tribe, sell it to tribe. And sometimes, it's a false hope. It's like that concept of it, it's just a bright idea. And so I think that when people are really, 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 really mean it, they kind of find a way of showing that costume, because people that are not actual designers outside of Carnival have shown costumes,
Right.
I've seen them. And so I think that when you really, really want it, you find a way of making things happen. And that's how I think about life, period.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
know that's not the answer you wanted, but
No. I think there are no kind of like predetermined pathways from an answer standpoint. I mean, I think it's good for people to sort of understand, both the ideal, but also I think the reality of things. I think what I took away from what you said is that it's not just an easy, hey, I want to do it, you kind of go do it. You have to really demonstrate some understanding or some ability to learn and understand about the process, about what's needed. And then I think you started to get into, what might be interesting, which is, I think, if you go through that journey and then you're trying to find a way to be found or to be noticed, right?
Yeah.
There's always this idea of getting discovered in the creative space or the entertainment space. Do you think that that's more a function of what you put out, and you have to kind of put out and put out and put out things consistently, and that if you do that and you do that well, then good things will come? Or do you think that there's some other things that people do, or they have to go find ways to make their own way too?
Well, I think there's, two ways to do it. I think that there's the authentic way to do it, which is when you are authentic to who you are as a designer, to the product that you're putting out, to the quality that you're offering, and your heart in the process. And then there's, the other way of doing it, where you kind of go above and beyond and do things for attention versus, you just, how to say this nicely. Where you go a different route, where you do things to get the attention first, and then after you get the attention, then you put out something.
Then you're trying to create the
Exactly.
substance.
Yeah. So you're not getting the attention from your product. You're getting the attention for yourself and then pushing the product. And it works both ways. It really just has to do with who you are, as a designer, as a creative, as an artist, and how you choose to market yourself, market your product and your brand, and what's more important to you. Because there's something that I always say, and I think that if there's anything that I would like, if somebody who's listening to this podcast and is new to the game, if there's anything that I would like them to take away from this, is that likes does not equal sales. Hype does not equal sales. It can help, but it doesn't. And this is something that I've learned from experience. Now, this is from my personal experience. I cannot speak for anybody else, but I know for a fact that there's a lot of people that have a lot of hype, a lot of likes, and no sales. And I will give you a very specific example of mine, where I would post a picture, whether it's myself or model, and the ones that get the least likes are the ones that I sell the most, because people, instead of staying there and liking that picture, go directly to the website to purchase. And that's my experience as a designer with an online store. I'm not saying that this is true for every designer and everybody in the game. I can only speak for myself.
And of course, you touch on one of my favorite subjects, which is marketing. And you've found some interesting ways, beyond your own social media presence, to further expand and extend through kind of like connecting with influencers and so on. So, you know, for marketers out there, brands out there, people out there, you know, how did you kind of come to the idea of, you know, I'm going to connect with others and, you know, and kind of expand and drive it that way?
Yeah, I think this is probably like the question that everybody wants an answer to, because everybody always asks me, like, how do you do it? Um, let's see how, I can give you some of the things that have has happened, and then we can just make an assumption that these kind of correlate, and opportunities kind of come my way. Um, but before I went into my business full time, I worked at some clubs in South Beach. I was a VIP director, which means that I kind of met a lot of people, and some were influencers, some were celebrities and athletes and things like that. And I don't think that anything necessarily came out of my relationships with athletes and influences back then. But what it did allow me to do is be able to have a relationship with these people where I never felt inferior to them, where I have always felt on the same level. And I think this is where a lot of people kind of go wrong. Like when you feel as if these people are, like superior to you, like they're, more important or too famous to work with you or wear your pieces and things like that, you kind of like put fear first, and you don't take the risks and start conversations that you should. And so I think for me, I just kind of really just started conversations, or I knew somebody that knew somebody that would put me on, or I would when I lived in LA, I met a few people there, and I kind of made connections there, and that was a very big part of the reason why I went to LA. I knew that I needed to be there to be able to connect with certain people. And luckily for me, the universe has aligned me with some other people, and that's how it's been. It's never really been, it's not to say like I have an agent that knows these people and they go and connect. It has always been very organic. It has always been, either referral or me directly contacting them, or them contacting me and reaching out to me. You'll be surprised at how many people that you will never believe have reached out to me. And I say that very humbly. And again, I think it has a lot to do with the product that I put out, the quality of the product. Word of mouth is a very, very, very powerful thing. And it just kind of worked out. I put myself in that frequency where I want to attract abundance and opportunities, and open doors. And I think for me, this is one of those ways that I can tell that story, where people see that there's these influencers that the world knows, and that they are rocking this very small brand, small
Yeah,
but growing.
right. Exactly. I want to kind of, I always like to get, introspective as we start to kind of get to the tail end of a conversation like this. A lot of people see the good side of building something, building a business,
Yeah.
building a brand. They see the output. They don't get to see the challenge. They don't get to see the hard work. They don't get to see the fears or the pains that kind of come along with it. What's an example that you can share of something not going right? Or a
Oh,
big bump in
yeah.
the road that you had to fight through and overcome as you've been kind of trying to build your brand.
Yeah, well, there's so many, because I've been doing this for a long time, and as you grow, these little trials and tribulations tend to get a little bit bigger and a little bit more complicated and a little bit more legal and a little bit, more international. So, I can give you a few examples, and let's see, where should I start? So, one of the issues that I encountered from the very beginning would be creating a product that worked for my international market in terms of sizing and fit, and cuts, and taking into consideration different curves and body types, and you know my product is catered to all women, and I know, and I say that with pride. So maybe one piece wouldn't work for someone, but another piece would, and that's something that I take very, very seriously. And when you're selling on a website, you have to be aware that you're now creating a universal product, and that you have to find a way to cater to multiple women of multiple sizes and shapes and colors and things like that. And so that, I think, was, my first biggest lesson, where I had to sit down and work on these patterns and figure out this sizing that would work, for me to be able to sell online, where I wouldn't have some crazy amount of exchange need, where it doesn't fit somebody, and so I'm in Trinidad and I'm shipping to Germany, and it gets there and it doesn't fit the customer there, and then she has to ship it back, and I have to ship another one, and that's all unnecessary cost. And that's something that I've kind of worked really hard to eradicate in my business. I have very, very minimal returns for exchanges. I don't do refunds, but I only do exchanges, and that's something that I had to make a decision a long time ago. And so I only do exchanges, and I can probably count in my two hands the amount of times that I've done that.
Right.
And that's because I've worked really, really, really hard to really create patterns for the universal body for all women. So that was one very challenging thing that I think any new designer should really take into account. You have to sit down, you have to work on those patterns, you have to learn how to make patterns and how to edit them. You cannot be a designer just fully reliant on a seamstress to create a product for you. These are things that are important to know, especially now you have so much time. Do some online classes, figure it out. YouTube, there's so many ways to learn. So that's one big hurdle for me, and luckily I've found the right way to solve that problem. And then as I grew, I'll give you, so shipping out of Trinidad used to be a real difficult
Right.
thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, because especially when you're used to shipping out of Miami and LA, and like the postal service there is so efficient, takes absolutely no time. And then you come to Trinidad and you have to like literally hand write your labels, and you have to literally go into the post office and stand in line to ship your products, and it was a challenge when I started doing that here. But like I would go to the post office every week, and so the people in the post office started realizing that it was just so time consuming for all of us, because I will go in there with like 20-30 orders, and they have to like manually process each one of these, and it was just not efficient. And they would start like telling me, they would start giving me things to make it more efficient at home, less time consuming for them there. But and then eventually we would switch to DHL. It was a process. But I've now got to the point where I'm shipping enough orders that I'm working with DHL directly for international orders, and so they come to me, they pick up orders here. Everything is much easier. I don't have to handwrite anything.
Right. From scratch.
But this switch only happened a few months ago. So prior to that, I was literally handwriting every DHL label, airway bill, and TT Post airway bill, or not airway bill for TT Post, whatever, the envelope for the local orders. And it was just like, when is this country that I love so much, going to realize that all of these little issues are just hindering the economy here and business here. But anyways, so that's something else that, luckily I've been able to solve with working with DHL directly.
Yeah.
And then there's things like shipping, importing into Trinidad from Brazil. And, now there's new laws here where I have to have a broker to clear, if I bring in one bathing suit, I need to hire a broker to clear one bathing suit, and it's just, so that's my next hurdle that I have to kind of figure out how to best maneuver. But, as you grow, there's so many things that it's part of business, and for anybody that thinks that it's always an easy road and it's glamorous, it's not. I have missed lots of birthdays and weddings and limes with my friends because I had to make the decision to stay at home and work, and really put in those hours. There's no work hours for me either, like I work from the time I get up to the time I go to sleep, which has made this, quarantine situation for me, actually, I think I'm thriving in it. I have no complaints about it at all. I think I really needed the time. But that's the reality of any business. You're going to have to deal with a lot of things, but that's what makes your business thrive or not, whether you're persistent enough and willing to kind of deal with those problems and move along.
You talked earlier on about, you said, hey, people could take a course, they could learn something. What are the things that you do to sharpen the saw and up your game, right? And get better at? What are the things that you need
Yeah.
to, and what are the things you do to keep up with that?
So my next two projects is, I'm very excited about it. But so two things I'm working on, which is my photography. So there's these online classes that I'm kind of taking online where you learn how to use. I have a camera, and in my head, I'm a phenomenal
Right.
photographer, but clearly there's things I need to learn. But that's an aspect of my business that I realize that I spend a lot of money on photography because I do so many collections, and there's always so many pictures that need to come out. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a crazy, like professional photographer, professional shot by a professional photographer. Sometimes it can just be a nice picture, and I think I'm more than capable of doing that. So, I got myself a camera, and now I'm just learning those settings. So I can kind of, handle that part of my business as well. That's, another aspect of it that I'm getting better at, so that I don't have to always keep hiring contracting photographers to do. And the other thing is, I'm very good with Illustrator and designing on that, but there's a new app I found out about the other day. And so I'm trying to learn how to use that app so I can sketch my designs more quickly on my phone or on my laptop. And then I can just forward that, to whoever it is, that whether it's my team in Brazil or whether it's, the Bliss team here, to see the sketches of the design. So I don't have to actually do it on paper and take a picture and send it and things like that. So my process is a little bit more professional. So
Gotcha.
those are the two things that I'm working on right now that's going to be helpful.
Yeah. As you kind of have to manage people in different places, a mix of cultures and different things. What have you, figured out about building team and people and kind of growing an organization that might be a little bit different than you thought when you were starting out?
What I've learned is that patience is the greatest virtue. I've learned that, especially when you're working in Trinidad and you're working in Brazil, that's also a third world country, very similar to Trinidad, and there's a lot of setbacks that you have to be very understanding of, and then you're working with countries like the US that's not understanding of those setbacks. So you're kind of like in this in between place where you have to mediate sometimes almost, But I think what I've learned, and that's really important, is to be patient with my team, and then also being patient with whoever it is that I'm doing business with, because sometimes just getting aggravating and fighting. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you have to cuss a little bit to get things done,
Sure.
but a lot of times, that sets like a negative precedence, and that's not necessary. And sometimes you can get that same result if you really just communicate with love and understanding and patience. And I tend to try to put myself in other people's shoes, and I am as patient as can be. And when I've reached the point where my business is going to be negatively impacted by your lack of efficiency, then I say what I have to say a little bit more aggressively. But I think that the most effective and most efficient way of handling that, is with patience and understanding, because everybody's time and process is different. And so once I am able to sit down and maneuver those and understand, so like, for example, if I know that a particular team of mine, because I have different teams that work on different collections, if I know that a particular team of mine takes a little bit longer to deliver, then what I have to do is design with a little bit more time so that they have the time to deliver, so then I adjust on my end to make sure that they meet my deadlines without necessarily communicating that with them. But that's an adjustment that I have to make because I see that that's what the issue is. So little things like that, and it's actually quite entertaining and also time consuming trying to figure it all out and catering for everyone. But again, it's part of business
It's
and
part,
it's
it
how
is.
we.
It's part of the journey. Have there been specific things that you found, for the female entrepreneurs out there? Have there been aspects of the journey that you're like, you know what, this might be a little bit more challenging for you, almost out of the gate, but here are ways that you found to overcome them.
No. And okay, so I've been
It's good
asked
to
this
hear.
question before. Yeah, I've been asked this question before, and I know that every time that I'm asked this question, they want me to say yes because that's the ideal answer. So you can have a nice follow up explanation of what you did, to show that you won that situation, you thrived through it. But what I learned from very on is that you know you create boundaries and you set the energy and the tone of your personality or your persona in a room. And if I go into a room and these people are aware that I am about my business, they are going to treat me as such. If they know that I'm easygoing and I'm unbothered about this and I don't care about deadlines, they're going to treat me as such. And so I'm always very clear about what I expect when I expect it. It doesn't mean that I always get it, but I think I've always been very clear. So I can't recall. I mean, maybe it has happened and it just went right over my head because that's not what I was focusing on. But I have never. I don't think I've ever been personally disrespected or thought of as less than as a businesswoman versus a businessman or anything like that. I think that I have always been very honest about who I am as a business person, and I think that they respond to that,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I think that's also important for every other woman. I'm not just a woman. I'm also very small. I'm like 5 foot tall, and so I've learned from a very young age that if I want to, you know, control the energy of a room, then I need to control the energy of the room, you know? And so that's what I do.
Great. So I think, maybe a couple of final questions would be, you've built a business that, as you mentioned before, right? You have customers now, all over the world, right? And I think a core part of the ethos of this show is the idea that, Caribbean leaders and entrepreneurs can have a global impact. Um,
Yeah.
what would you say to the people kind of coming behind that have that ambition that you've learned about, being global class and showing yourself at the global level?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, me having lived in these other countries for so long allowed me to not ever think of being in Trinidad as a limitation or being anywhere, period. Um, and I think that maybe that's what differs at times from someone that was raised here and still live here and never had the opportunity to kind of step out of Trinidad, and they may think that the international market may not be interested in what they have to offer, but that's so far from the truth because like I've shipped to some crazy countries, Australia, Switzerland, you know, I have customers there. And I'm here in this small little island in the Caribbean, and sometimes I have no idea how they find me, no clue, you know. And sometimes I ask, and sometimes it depends on the conversation. But at the end of the day, I have a map in my office that I scratch every time I have a new country that I ship to. I scratch off that country, and I'm thrilled every time I get to scratch off a new country because that's exciting for me to think that this brand that is now rooted in this very very small island in the Caribbean has such a reach, an international reach, a global reach, and I remember the last time I was having issues clearing my shipment from Brazil. I remember very lovingly and with a lot of respect, complaining to the customs officer. I was like, how it is that y'all making it so difficult for me to to import a product that's my own, that I made, that I created, in another country, yes, but I'm importing it. And I'm then exporting it out of Trinidad. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to create something that's amazing here. And y'all are making it difficult for me. And, we have that conversation. And at the end of the day, it goes beyond them, They have bosses as well. But opportunities are limitless. And, I never was good at seeing boundaries. So I guess in a way that worked out for me.
Well, that was Chandra Maharaj, founder of Chandra Maharaj Designs, a company that shows what's possible when you design your fashion business for a world with fluid boundaries and don't let yourself conform to any specific box. If you'd like to be the first to know when the next episode drops, please subscribe to this podcast via your preferred platform. And don't forget, share Uptick with a friend. On behalf of Caribbean Ideas and the Snapshot Network, this is Chike Farrell signing off. And remember, keep on ticking up.